Hey, Dr. C here with you. So here's the first step for really getting full thyroid recovery, and that's getting iodine dialed in. So why is this the big first step? Honestly, there's not a single thing that's most important. So not a coincidence that this one is number one. There's nothing else that will make a bigger difference in getting things right. For a lot of people, this is two things. This is the biggest controllable reason that they develop thyroid disease and the biggest opportunity to get it better again. So let's talk deep about why this is the first step and how you can make sense of it and how you can make use of it. So for starters, let's talk about what causes thyroid disease. The context of that makes a big difference in understanding the relevance of iodine. So the causes are mostly genetic. We know that identical twins, if one has thyroid disease, the other has a 79% chance. It gets more common with age. Gender is a factor. Gender is also genetic, so it's not separate. So we can't control age, so genes are the big part. But what do the genes that cause thyroid disease do? What are they responsible for? Well, these are genes that affect some enzymes. And these are enzymes that regulate iodine, and they're called deiodinase pathways. So here's kind of how the story plays out. There's two kinds of genetic groups that humans come in when it comes to iodine. So one group can do really well in environments that contain a lot of iodine. Another group can do really well in environments that are very low in iodine. Why did this happen? Well, humans evolved in different ecosystems regarding iodine. One big group of humans was close to oceans, and one big group was far away. So those close to oceans, they ate a lot of clams and seafood and sea vegetables, and they really never had low levels of iodine. But they had to manage high levels, and high levels can be toxic if they're not managed well. So they got really good at blocking iodine from getting into the thyroid and hurting them. Now, the other group of humans, they mostly lived in areas that were further from the ocean, inland, closer to fresh water. They could have areas that the soil contained very little iodine. So they had to become really good at just like having a vacuum cleaner that pulled in all the iodine into their thyroid. Now, when you turn on that vacuum cleaner, when you've got that, you can't block things. Everything comes in. So you can be really good at blocking iodine, or you can be a vacuum cleaner and you can make use of every speck of it, but you can't have both. So these two gene expressions are still around today in various ways. And those with vacuum cleaners, they do great when there's very little iodine in the environment. But when there's amounts that are generally sufficient, they have problems. So back in 92, we had 112 countries on Earth that were categorized as severely iodine deficient. By the time the next decades passed and we hit 2014, that number dropped to 0. The United States is not iodine deficient. The overall average intake is appropriate, but on the high side. Now that's the average intake, but there are subpopulations between about 20 to 40% based on age, gender, ethnicity, in which people are getting above amounts that are considered to be appropriate. So they're getting excessive amounts, this group of about a third of people. Now, if you're in that group and you have the genes that make you prone to thyroid disease, you're apt to get thyroid disease. That's how things come on. There's other factors, of course, that aren't controllable, like the age and the genetics and the gender, but of the controllable factors, this is the biggest thing. Now, if you've read about thyroid disease, you might have heard about other factors. And there's a lot of things that can be relevant in some cases and have been looked at in research. Gluten exposure or Epstein-Barr or radiation exposure. Yeah, all these things are worth considering in some contexts. But researchers argue that once we look past iodine, every other factor together, all of them combined, is less relevant than iodine. So this is a big deal. Now, does this mean you're getting too much? Well, you could be. There are people that get amounts that are just unsafe, and that certainly can be a driver for this. But more often than not, you're not getting weird amounts. It's more a matter of a personal intolerance. And again, this goes along with the genes that give rise to thyroid disease. Now, a logical question is, should you test your levels? And back to the idea about not necessarily getting amounts that are unusual, testing doesn't really help. That's because, again, you might not be getting amounts that are weird, but also because the amounts that build up in the thyroid aren't always reflected in what we see in blood or urine levels of iodine. So it's more a matter of too much building up and your body reacting badly to it. And that's not predictable based upon testing. The main way to know if it's a factor or not is to simply reduce iodine intake and watch and see if thyroid function improves. So reducing it, well, I don't know, I shouldn't have said that because you may have already be on the low side of that. Most are not, but it's possible. So it's really being in a good window. And what does that window look like? Well, to prevent thyroid disease, it's somewhere like 50 to 200 micrograms per day. Now, let me just say real quick, since you can't test, foods don't have good labeling, and it's really hard to know exactly what you're consuming. So the Thyroid Resa Diet book, I talk you through easy ways based upon selecting food groups to get to these right targets. So just know there's an answer for that before you panic, because I would panic. So yeah, that's a range to keep thyroid problems from forming. And what if there are already thyroid issues there? This is the cool part of the story, and this is the newer part of the story. So along with getting a right amount to prevent problems, you've got a big opportunity of getting to a different threshold to reverse problems. That's below 100 micrograms per day. It's not forever, but it's long enough to help heal your thyroid. For most people, that might be 3, 6, 9 months, maybe 12 months, but that's an easy way to take the load off of it. Here's how I think about that. If you think about that iodine was like too much, like the straw that broke the camel's back, if you took the last straw off, that wouldn't help the camel heal. You got to unload it completely. And same thing for your thyroid with iodine. It's not just going down by one smidgen, it's a matter of giving a low enough amount so it can fix itself. Iodine is important for making thyroid hormones, but it's also a huge source of free radicals. Think about bleach or hydrogen peroxide. Iodine fits in that category. It's an antiseptic like those things are because it generates massive amounts of free radicals. And that's kind of how it allows thyroid hormones to produce so much energy in the body. They're involved with high energy transformations. But if there's too much of that, the free radicals damage the thyroid cells. And that makes them not work. It makes the immune system come in and start attacking things. And that's the main driver of much of thyroid disease. So what do you do? How do you get in these windows? Yeah, the main action steps are to be aware of things that have a lot of iodine and things that have occasional huge amounts of iodine. And some categories to consider. First up is cosmetics, personal care products. PVP is one big ingredient to look for. It's also called polyvinylpyridone, kind of a weird name. There's also a thing called TEA, triethylamine. Those are the two most common iodine compounds found in personal care products. They're not the only ones. I do have a full list in the Thyroid Resa Diet. Now, natural cosmetics often still have these, but they give different names to them. They'll often call them kelp extract or sea vegetable extract. Take a look for those. The cool thing is that there's a lot of cosmetics that don't use these. And again, it's not like good ones or bad ones or natural versus synthetic. It's just whether they happen to be there. But my experience is that about a third or so of cosmetics do have those ingredients, which means that the remaining 2/3 don't. So you've got a lot of options to work around. Next up is supplements. Take a look at every supplement you take. Anything that has any names that have anything to do with iodine, don't take that. That's going to be more than what you need. The goal of getting below 100 micrograms to heal the thyroid, there's always at least 50 or even close to 100 micrograms, even in diets that don't have high iodine foods, because all foods have a fair amount of iodine. So when you're wanting to get to that threshold, any obvious sources you want to avoid, because otherwise you're going to be above a range in which your thyroid could heal. So you don't want supplements that have iodine. And you'd be surprised. I mean, multivitamins, you might expect that, but electrolytes, energy boosters, antioxidants, you see it in some weird places that it just makes no sense. Of course, you'll see it in a lot of thyroid support products. Also doesn't make sense, but it's a common resident. So scour your supplements, avoid those that have iodine. Easy step is to look at salt. We know that there's a big range of how much is naturally occurring. A lot of sea salt, even if it's not fortified with iodine, has it there just already. I love kosher salt. I love salt that's just salt. Look for pure salt that doesn't have a lot of additives, preservatives, or synthetic things like iodine in it. That's the cleanest, safest option. Then there's the red light foods. So in the Thyroid Resa Diet, I break foods down into green light, yellow light, red light. Red light foods always have a lot or sometimes have huge amounts. And towards the journey of keeping your thyroid safe and healed, you want to avoid those. Then we've got the green light foods. These are ones that have the lowest amounts of iodine. These are safe. Any amounts, any combination, any frequency. And finally, we've got the yellow light foods. These are consistent in how much they have, and they have moderate amounts. They're not things that are going to have a whopping dose unexpectedly. When you're working to reverse thyroid disease, you want to avoid even those yellow light foods. Once it has gotten better and you move on to maintenance, you don't have to eat them, but you can do 1 or 2 a day without problems. If someone is pregnant or nursing, then they want to have 1 or 2 servings of yellow light foods per day. So how do you know if all this stuff is working? Well, a couple thoughts, one of which is just check your thyroid levels. Take a look at the antibodies, look at your thyroid scores, talk to your doctor. I can help if need be, but you can see quite objectively if thyroid function is improving. Also, watch your symptoms. There are ways in which thyroid hormones work that we can't see on the blood tests. Some of it goes on behind the scenes within the cells, and the blood changes don't always reflect what's happening in a perfect way. So I've had it a lot to where someone will say, yeah, I had hair loss for years. I started the thyroid reset diet. My thyroid levels improved, not as much as I thought, but my hair loss got better. So there's many times to where even if thyroid levels don't improve as much as you wish, the symptoms that correspond with them can. And that's the most important part. Now here's a big question. What if you're on thyroid medication already? What if you're on that and you're taking it, and how does that affect all of this? Well, a couple of thoughts. You may need to lower that. It's quite common that if your thyroid gets a chance to work better, it will. And suddenly the amount of medication you're taking might be more than you need because you're contributing more. And in those cases, it's good to be aware of that. You want to check your scores and be ready to work with your doctor to lower the dose as appropriate. The other big thought is that many people on medications really didn't need them to begin with, or maybe they've outgrown them already, but you wouldn't know that because they can block your thyroid from working. Kind of a weird thing, but they can. So when you're doing this, even if your scores aren't showing that, yeah, you need less medication, it's great to work with a doctor who knows about deprescribing, who knows whether you're someone who needs medication forever or not. A couple simple rules. Those that shouldn't stop medication are those who are pregnant or nursing and those who don't have a thyroid. Barring those few things, most everyone else has a good chance to do less or no medication and be successful about that. Now, what if you've been doing this for a while? You're on the green light foods, you've scoured all your sources, but there's no apparent sign of it helping. This is the one case where it can be useful to check your iodine levels. There's a test called a urinary iodine to creatinine ratio, and you want to see that less than 100, just like 100 micrograms per day intake. If you're not there, it means one of two things. Either you've not found all the sources of iodine, take a look at the book and dig a little more closely, or you had whopping exposure that you've just not got caught up on yet. It might just be more time. So if your scores are still high and you've already cut out all the sources and you're totally sure about that, and you were taking some big amounts before, you might just stay the course and look at your scores again a few months down the road. Sometimes it can take a year to really have it clear when there was a lot in your system. The other thought, if you're doing this but not doing better, there may be comorbidities. Morbidity is an illness, and co means, it just goes along with. There's a lot of illnesses that go along with thyroid disease. So if you've got thyroid disease, you've got a really good chance of having one or several other things as well. And a lot of these things are not diagnosed. They can cause symptoms. They can also prevent thyroid recovery. Just a couple that are really common, latent iron depletion, so like a mild early anemia, adrenal stress, hypothalamic pituitary adrenal dysregulation for a fancier name, disordered calcium, hypocalcemia, hypercalcemia. Those are 3 out of about 15, 16 really common comorbidities. So you want to collaborate with a doctor who knows about these things and can screen you for them and identify problems that are there and take care of them. So is this something you've got to do forever? Yes and no. So not in a way that's hard, but long term, you can heal your thyroid from this. You'd want to make sure that it stays that way. And if you did get exposure to a lot of iodine, well, you could break the camel's back again. So stay off the red light foods. Be mindful of the maintenance guidelines. And it's really just knowing those couple of yellow light foods and being deliberate with them. So that's basically it. If you didn't understand and control your iodine levels, it's just about impossible for your thyroid to get radically better. Almost nothing else can help. At the same time, this one single step has been clinically proven to reverse most types of thyroid disease for most adults. And of course, diet is best done in concert with other appropriate facets of care. Good lifestyle, nutraceuticals that may be appropriate, thyroid meds if they're needed, even if they're not needed, they should be well managed, and then identifying these comorbidities. With that stuff, you can do better. And that's been my gig for decades, and it's possible. I've seen so many people that have been just stuck and really struggling with this that thought that there was no hope. And in not a long amount of time, by doing some simple stuff that makes sense like this, they were able to reclaim their health. And I hope the next one's going to be you. All right, take great care. We'll see you again real soon.